Are you tired of spending your time and money chasing strategy after strategy only to discover what worked 10, 5, or even 2 years ago is not working now? Things shift fast in the online space, and if you're not keeping up, you're getting left behind. It's time for something different. Welcome to the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast, where every single episode will be jam-packed with proven, profitable strategies, behind-the-scenes secrets, and what's working now resources from industry experts and global influencers to help you scale your business, shorten your learning curve, and stand out in a crowded, noisy marketplace. And now, your host, award-winning marketing and media strategist, and international speaker, Kathi Laughman.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast. I am looking forward to sharing another amazing industry expert with you today. And today we have one of my most favorite people, Kathi Laughman, and she serves professionals committed to continuously creating new pathways to success in their life and work through her books, courses, and communities. Her next book, Adjusted Sales, Are You Ready for What's Next?, will be releasing soon. Its message is that when we begin to anticipate our future free from fear, we can embrace change and ultimately become its architect. I love that. Thank you so much for being here with me today, Kathi.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm thrilled to be here.
I love it. And I love that this is not your first book, right? Because you've already had a book before this one, and I actually really love that one. So I'm really anticipating the new book coming out. So tell us a little bit. Actually, let's go back a little further. Let's talk about your journey, because we all know that we didn't just wake up one day and say, oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and this is what I want to do. There's always a journey that gets us to where we are and gets us to the place where we're meant to serve, when we're doing what we know we were meant to do. And I know you are. So can you share a little bit about that with my audience, and then we'll talk about your books?
Well, sure. I think that my journey, my message really comes from my journey, which I think is true for many of us, most of us probably. But in the first book, the title of that one is Adjusted Sales, What Does This Make Possible? It really talks a lot about my journey. But primarily, I think the message is sometimes what you think is the worst thing that could ever happen to you turns out to be a turning point that actually sets you on the path that you're meant to go on. And in my case, that was a professional situation where I thought I would be in the job that I was in. I'd helped found the company. I was at the building to take the keys from the landlord when we first walked in. It was that type of thing. And I'd been there for 17 years and was in part of the senior leadership team. And I really fully expected to live out my career there and even retire from there. So when I went to work one day and within an hour of arriving for work was told my position had been eliminated, and this was in January of 2009, it wasn't just the end of a job for me. It was the end of how I perceived my life would be. And I was an empty nester, and it was really a shock to the core. And to be candid, there would be no book. I would not be a certified coach. I would not have my own business. None of this would have ever happened had that not happened in my life. And so what felt horrific in that moment really was the impetus to turn everything in a new direction. And I think sometimes, whatever it is to you, fate, God, the universe, however that feels or is manifested for you, sometimes we get that kick in the pants, that way to say, hey, I really need you to come over here and start thinking about this and doing this. So that really is what happened for me, Patty, is I would have never made these changes on my own. And that's why this whole message for me of disruptive change became so important, because I saw other people going through something similar, losing their jobs. Because of course, in 2008, 2009, our economy, the condition it was in, a lot of people were going through this. I saw a lot of other people saying, well, I guess I'm done. And I just am so emphatic with folks that, no, you're not. My tagline is there's more value in the rest of your story than you ever dreamed possible. I totally believe that. That's not just a soundbite to me. There is more value in the rest of our stories for every one of us.
I love that. I think that every pivotal change that happened in my life happened because of something like that. I mean, I'm part of what you just said. 2008, I was in the mortgage industry, and we all know what happened in 2008.
Sure.
Now, I also had a marketing company then too. So I was still doing marketing and mortgage. And it was just the pivotal change that said, oh, I'm done with mortgage. Now I'm going to totally focus on my marketing company, which was a huge change for me. And at the same time, that was also the year that I moved from Las Vegas to Dallas and knew zero people and had to start completely over. And now when I look back at my career, that was probably the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And every step along the way, from deciding to be a speaker to being an author, every single thing I did, I always like to joke and say it happened accidentally because the opportunity arose. But now when I think about it realistically, it wasn't just that the opportunity came and I accidentally did it. It's just that I said yes and leaned into it. And it was a huge change for me. But I think that's probably key, is being ready for the change and being really willing to lean in and step into it. Opportunities come every single day. We have the choice to decide whether or not we live in faith or fear.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, Emily Dickinson has a famous line where she says, to dwell in possibility. And I love that idea. I love the image that creates, because to dwell is to live. That's not just saying, well, see the possibilities. It's saying live in them, dwell in possibility. And it's just so important, I think, because we can look at everything and say, oh, I'm going to try to have a positive mindset. I flip that and say, I want you to have a possibility mindset. I can't remember who coined the term, but I love the word possibilitarian, just because to me, it's like, what's possible? And I think that that's really such an important thing. Like for you, all those things that happened for you, it wasn't just enough for you to agree to absorb them or take them on. It wasn't just let your shock absorbers kind of soften the blow. It was you looking at it and saying, what do I do with this? What can I create from this? And that to me is the difference.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. I remember the day I was here in Dallas when we first moved here, and it was snowing, and I thought to myself, oh my goodness. And I have to admit, I had a little Patty pity party, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, here I am in this new town that I don't know anyone. And what am I going to do? I luckily got out of the mortgage business before everything totally tanked. And I thought, oh, what am I going to do? And I remember, like, I can feel it, Kathi. I remember standing up and thinking to myself, girl, you need to pull your pants up here and put your big girl panties on and remember that, yeah, that's true. You don't know anybody. But instead of thinking, oh, bummer, I don't know anybody, I should be looking at it as, oh my goodness, how lucky I am and how blessed I am that I live in a town that's as big as this DFW is, and I don't know anybody. And I remember my husband coming home and he's like, what's this on the refrigerator? And I had written 100,000. And he said, what's that? And I said, I made the decision today that in 1 year, I'm going to know 100,000 people. I'm going to connect with 100,000 people and serve them. And I'm going to make $100,000 doing it. And my husband laughed and he said, oh, I like that. I actually did it in 9 months. It was a lot of work. But the point was, once I made that decision, I just wasn't going to change. That was it. I decided my pity party was over. And I think that for me, that's kind of how I approach things. It's just my personality to approach it. Nobody's saying that you're not ever going to have a pity party. You're not ever going to be like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Of course, things come at us all the time. It's what you do next that really makes the decision.
Yeah, I think that's a key point though, Patty, is that sometimes we can not allow ourselves that moment, right? That pivot moment of grief, and to just admit, this is not what I would have chosen. There is some grief there. There is that moment where you say, this is hard, but that's okay. But I think if we give ourselves permission to feel that and experience that, then what happens is we're free to move forward without carrying that with us. If we never expressed it, it's suppressed. And so we kind of take that with us, and then it pops up again later with self-doubt and some of the things that happen. But if we shine a light on it and say, you know what, this hurts, this is hard, and it's okay, it hurts and it's hard, but how I feel in this moment is not the measure of the value of this moment. It's just how I feel. And so we get to transition from that feeling, that emotion, to something that has hope in it. And that's when you move from, and for me, I call it moving from hope to faith, because then you move into action, and our choices live in our actions. And so as soon as we're absolutely willing to move from that moment and move ourselves into action, then it's amazing the choices that start just appearing on the horizon.
I agree with you. And I think it happens a lot too. I mean, there's always going to be different things that happen all the time. I mean, no matter what has happened for me in my life, even just 2 weeks ago, I had a little setback, personally and professionally, that happened in my life, right? But here's the thing that I really realized when it did. When you are ready for that, when you're prepared and you do have that faith, one of the things for me that I didn't realize in the moment, because we never do in the moment, sure. Right? But I remember that I have always said, I'd rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies, right? And so I have built a tribe of people that I really love, that I serve, and that they serve me too. And I think that is really wonderful. The minute it happened, I was like, oh my gosh, like I was pretty freaked out, of course, every time things hit us, right? I really was. And then I thought to myself, you know what, Patty? If it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a tribe to build a business. And one of the things that I feel so blessed is that when people come to me and say, oh, Patty, this happened or that happened, I love to be able to say, oh, how can I help? But the thing is, very rarely have I ever reached to my network and asked for help. And this was the one time that I actually really needed to do it. And I am amazed at how many people stepped up for me and said, oh, Patty, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And it was a tough week, but everything happened the way it was supposed to. And I remember thinking on the weekend going, wow, what a blessing that is. So sometimes it's also in giving yourself the freedom to ask. You don't have to do it all yourself. There are people who will help you and will serve you. We do it to others all the time. Sometimes we're not always so willing to ask. People want to serve you and help you. They really do. You just have to ask.
I think that's a really good point, because in many cases, when we feel like, or we insist on doing it all ourselves, and we think we're doing that from a place of service, and I do think that that's our honest intent. But the reality of it is that we're actually doing people a disservice, not allowing them to serve, because that's letting them shine, right? I think I learned this lesson probably, and I have to keep relearning it. I think those of us that we just have that servant heart, it can be difficult for us to, it's not necessarily that it's hard to ask for help. It's that I think sometimes it's challenging to think you don't want to take anybody away from what is important to them. But I learned as a parent, probably my daughter was late teens and maybe early 20s, that transition of, I'm not going to be the person who always is the one who teaches her. And it was a hard distinction for me to give up, right? I really wanted to be the focal point, the person she turned to for everything. And I had to come to that realization that I'm not the best teacher for her, my own daughter, of everything. There are others out there that will be a better teacher for her on some things than I could ever be. And being able to rest in that and trust that the right teachers would be there for her, and then be grateful that those teachers were there for her, because it made her so much better. and then she could go on and give and move on and serve. It is, I think sometimes, whether we like it or not, ego does come into play on some of these things because we want to be the one, but at the same time, it's setting back and saying, I want to be the one when I'm the right one. And I think that that's a key distinction, but that starts, in my opinion, with allowing others to serve us. I don't think we get there until we really can allow others to serve us. And you're such a master at that. I mean, I think it's easier for people like me and like you when we meet each other, right? Because
Right.
we can recognize that in each other and kind of coax that out for each other. But that's one of the things that I tell people when you talked about having the skills and being ready for what's next. When I talk about being ready for what's next, one of the key points there, Patty, is always this: who's in your tribe? Who's in your inner circle? Because if that's not strong, if you don't have that strong inner circle, that's going to be a lonely place. And it's not that you won't survive. It's not that you can't come out of it. But gosh, it's so much better, so much easier, and has so much more purpose when you do have that tribe and that inner circle there with you.
I think in life too, because one of the things I remember reading, I mean, it's been around for a long time, so I'm sure a lot of people have read it, but there was this article many years ago that said that we choose approximately 5 friends. And those 5 friends represent things to us, and that we instinctively, when something happens, knows which friend we need to call for whatever that thing is. And I remember at the time thinking how interesting it was, because I have 3 very close friends. None of them are entrepreneurs, but collectively they've been my friend for over 100 years. So they've been friends with me for a long time. And instinctively, I know that when this happens and I pick up that telephone, I'm eventually going to tell all 3 of them, of course, but I know exactly which friend I need to pick up the phone and call, depending upon whatever the situation is, good or bad, right? I just instinctively know that. I think the same thing happens to us in business. When you build a tribe and you have people, you do instinctively know, if you really do have that tribe, those people, you instinctively know when this happens or that happens, whether it is good or bad, whether it's an opportunity, whether it is, maybe a speaking engagement, or maybe there's a way to serve and you hear something, whatever it is, you instinctively know who it is that you should pick up the phone and call first. Right. And I think that is just something we just know. We don't always trust it in ourselves. I do. I listen to my gut when my gut says that. Always. I don't always listen to my gut. And every time I haven't, it has come back and bites me. I like to think I'm better at it now, though. But in these things, when it comes to relationships, business and personal, I always listen, and it has never let me down. But I think instinctively, I always know who to call. And one of the things I feel very, very blessed is you're one of those people for me.
Oh, well, thank you. And you for me as well. One of the questions that I ask people and talk to people about when we talk specifically about inner circle, because I think sometimes we toss these terms around and people think, well, what does that even mean, right? And one of the key points that I always try to make for people is this one: who is your truth teller? And we all need one. We all need one that we can go to that's our truth teller. And you have fulfilled that role for me on so many times, because you need somebody to go to that you trust, that you know is going to tell you the truth, is going to give you good feedback, honest, compassionate feedback to say, I don't know, I don't think that's right for you. Or maybe you should look at this. Have you considered that? Or, they're your truth teller. And it's not that they mean to discourage you or because a lot of times they'll say, I think that's perfect. But because they're your truth teller, and there's been that time where they've shown you something, they've held up the mirror for you to see something that maybe you didn't want to see, when they tell you, I think that's brilliant, it's so completely accepted and validating, because if they didn't think that, they wouldn't say that. So I think you're right. It's like, who you need to go to. Like, if you feel like you need your truth teller, that's who you're going to go to. If you just need your sister, you need that person that is just going to say, I got you, I understand, and just going to sit with you and be there with you. You know who that person is. And so I think you're right. We have these people that fulfill these roles for us, and we for them. I find it interesting, and I'm sure you've read this and know about this, but a lot of people talked about the love languages. And I think it's interesting to realize that how anybody shows up for you in their love language is also the love language that they want to receive back. And so what ends up happening is however that role is for you with that person, most likely that's your role back to them too. Isn't that interesting?
I find it interesting. And, it took so many years for them to do the follow-up book for children. I was thinking, man, why didn't they come out with that when my kids were still young? I mean, now they have it for how you should look at that from your children's point of view. And I remember when I read it, I thought, oh, that is so good. Because I remember early on thinking that, whenever I had to discipline or negotiate, whatever the case is, every one of my children, I have 6 daughters, so every one of them was completely different, and we didn't do the same things because it's really who they were, right? And looking back now, it is so clear to me what each one of their love languages were and stuff. So I think it is literally phenomenal. But you know what? You said something that I think is really important and I want to kind of touch on is when you talk about focusing on the importance of being ready for change, right? So being ready for change, I really love that too, because I think when you're ready for something, it's not as fearful, right? Now that I have lived through a tornado here in Dallas, I'm ready. So now I know when things happen, I know what to do now, right? I've already got everything where it needs to be. I'm ready every time now. So it's not so, being ready takes away the fear. And I think that in our relationships, right, like we keep going back to in my personal life, I'm ready for that too. I know just what to do when those things happen. But in business, I think when you think about it, that truth teller, I think part of the truth teller is also trust, because when you have that truth teller, you have a relationship with them built on trust, because then when they are telling you, you know that you can trust them. So I think that when you're getting ready for change, part of building your network or your inner circle, because there's your network and then there's kind of like your inner network, right? So your inner circle, as you like to call it. And I love that. Really, it's a lot easier, I guess I would say, to be ready for change if you have already done the work and built those relationships. So when change is needed or comes, whether you knew it was coming or not, you already have things in place. So kind of like this is getting ready to be ready, right? So what would you kind of say about that? What are some things that people could do if they haven't already have those things in place? What are some of the things that you would tell them to do that maybe they should start thinking about? It's not like, oh, she told me I should do this, I should do that today. But like, what are the things that they should be thinking about or questions they should be asking themselves? Some of them may already have some of those things and they didn't even realize it.
Yeah, it's, to be candid, this is why I am writing now and working on the second book, because I realized that this was the most important thing. There's a lot of people out there that work around and teach about what to do when it happens to you, whatever that is, right? Whatever it is. This is how you cope with divorce. This is how you cope with losing your job. This is how you cope with blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of stuff out there about post-event response things. And I really wanted to do something that said, wait a minute, what if you were ready for it? Not to be negative, not to be a doomsday person, but what if you actually had developed in yourself the skills that you didn't have to be afraid of it? And that's really what I came down to when I really was working on this for my own self and my own life and the people that I was working with was, this isn't about what you do when it happens. This is what you've been doing before it happens. And if we can get ourselves positioned correctly, then we have the facilities and the skills to do with it. And I talk about that. That's really what the second book is about, is how to be ready for what's next, even when you don't know what it is, because it comes down to some key points. And I think the first one, Patty, is living in gratitude and having a gratitude practice. Because when you come at life or business or relationships or anything from the position of grace, it just changes your perspective about everything, because you just see things differently. So I think gratitude is key. I think it's very, very important to know who you are and who you want to be in the world. Because if you don't have that anchor, that foundation, then you don't know what to do with anything. You know, if somebody gave you $1 million and you didn't have anything in mind for it, you're just going to spend it on stuff and then say, what the heck happened to my money? But if you had this driving purpose and this driving force in your life of this is the impact you're trying to make in the world, and somebody gave you that money, you would say, thank you, that's for this. You would recognize whatever comes into your life is for that. And so that's one of the other things is saying to people, you need to always have something that is your primary thing that you're working on, whatever that is. And every single day, we need to have something that we knew when we went to bed the night before, that the next day, what it was that we wanted to get accomplished in it. So it's just having that sense of, you know, I'm going to keep myself in action, in movement. And then, of course, we've talked a little bit about having the people around you and having the right folks around you. But I think the other thing is this. The people that are able to sustain change and turn it into something meaningful are always, without question, lifelong learners. They're people that have embraced the fact that they're always learning and they're always looking to learn from any situation. And they're willing to be beginners again. They're willing to have that beginner mindset. And that I think is a key component, Patty, of being a learner, is that you're willing to be the beginner at something again, knowing that you can be confident that you can learn it. If you're always learning, then you're never afraid that you can't learn. So I think those are just some of the key points that I talk about, but I think they're good practical things. This is not feel-good stuff. This is, listen, what are you doing? Or what are you learning? Who are you hanging around with? What are you trying to get done? What are you grateful for? Really some key things that are all about who you are and how you show up in your own life.
I love that. I love it. You know, about a year or so ago, somebody gave me this book. I wish I could remember the name of it right now because it'd probably be important. But it was about being mindful. And one of the things that I really realized is I would always consider myself intentional, but you know what? There's a difference between intentional and mindful. And I thought, because I'm very intentional, but I was thinking about it and he said, well, are you mindful in the simple things in your life? And I'm like, what do you mean? He said, well, when you take your dogs for a walk, are you taking your dogs for a walk and smelling the nice air and looking at nature and enjoying it? Or in your mind while you're taking them for a walk, are you thinking about what you're going to do when you get back and after you've done that? And I thought, that was really good because I think I was doing that, right? Mm-hmm. And I made a decision that I was going to be mindful about all the joyful things in my life. That was part of the gratitude thing. I thought I'd actually done that, but I was kind of expanding on that. But I have to say, when I made that decision, it also helped me to make other decisions and to embrace the change. And one of the things that when I say it to people now, they're like, what? Just yesterday, somebody called me up to tell me how freaked out they were because they had just got let go of their job. And she's going through a divorce. So really tough time. And she just was frozen, like she didn't know what to do. And the first thing out of my mouth without even thinking, right? Like I was going to help her with action, but the first thing out of my mouth was, I am so excited for you to see what opportunities are coming next. And she was like, I can't believe that's the first thing you're saying to me. But the reality is, if you really embrace that, I have really come to really do that now. Whenever something happens in my life, I mean, I have thought I was here and then we moved and then we're back. I mean, like I've had a lot of change, but I have to tell you, every time there has been a change, it has always been the change for the better. I didn't always see it in the moment, right? And now I just embrace it. And it's like, I know something exciting is going to happen or this wouldn't be happening. Maybe there's going to be a little stuff I have to come through first, but that's okay. In the end, I know this is going to be a change for the better in some way, shape, or form. And I get to decide that and lean in. And it's so much easier for me now. I mean, I'm not saying in the moment when it first hits me, I don't react, but I think you can be proactive or reactive, right? And I choose to always be proactive.
Yeah, I think it's the idea of being a creator. It's the idea of that whatever happens is the making of something. It is not the something, it is the making of something, right? And I share a story about this in the first book, but my daughter loves cooking and loves anything to do with that. And so we have, over the course of her life, now she's an adult now, she's 37 now. So this has been a while, but we'll get hooked on certain cooking shows. And there is a cooking show called Chopped. And these chefs come in and compete. But the key here is they walk in and they're all given a basket. And in this basket are the identical ingredients. And they all get the same ingredients. And they're odd and they don't go together. I mean, they're not anything you would ever think that you could pull together and create a cohesive, beautiful, tasty dish from. And yet they get this basket and they compete based on how well they use all of the ingredients and how well they transform them into something that delights their diner. And they're judged on that, how well they do that. And I think I love that as an example of that's what happens in life. We're given these baskets, and whether we realize it or not, even though the specific ingredients are different for all of us, it's the same basket. It's what do we do with it? And it's all these other life skills that we've talked about, Patty, and all these other things that are the skills we bring to the table that help us know what to do with those ingredients. When those chefs walked in and they opened that basket, they weren't starting from scratch. They were starting from a place of experience of, I've been here before. I've had ingredients before and I've created with it. What am I going to create with these ingredients? So even when the ingredients change, we're still the chef. We're still the creator. We still know what we're supposed to do so we can get to work, get to the business of doing what it is we do.
I love that. And I love that when they look at their basket of ingredients, right, they could look at it and go, oh my goodness, these don't really go together. What in the world am I going to do? Right. And sit there and go, oh, or they could say, this is pretty interesting. I love watching cooking shows. And I have to tell you, more times than I can even count have I said, oh, wow, I never would have thought that would have been paired together. That's really interesting. And I love it. I a lot of times have it on in the background, when I'm working for noise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'll stop and go, what did they just say they put together? And it is very interesting. So I think that is interesting in life because we all do have different ingredients. So I really love that. So Kathi, this is the Marketing, Media, Money Show, and we always want to talk about strategy. So what would a strategy be that you could share with my viewers? So whether they are corporate, whether they are in career transition, or whether they're an entrepreneur, what's a strategy that you could give to them that they can, we're talking about action. So what is an action strategy?
Well, in keeping with some of the things that we've been talking about in terms of seeing possibilities and being truth tellers and all of that, the strategy that I would encourage all of us to use is this. And it's going to sound, at first like that's not a strategy, but it is. Know where you're vulnerable. And I think this is important, especially when we talk about our businesses and our money and all of this, is to know where we're vulnerable. And how do you know that? And you and I've talked before about risk, and you're far better at risk than I am. I'm more risk averse than you. You have a much better tolerance for risk. But I will say that it really comes down to what assumptions have you made? And I'm saying that from the standpoint of you've worked really hard to do something and you want to keep growing that. Part of that is protecting that. And so how do you be ready for what's next is in some cases not neglecting what you need to pay attention to and paying attention to it and watching for signs. So I think a really key strategy is pay attention. So you were talking about being mindful, but pay attention to what's happening in your business. Know your numbers, know your market, know where you're vulnerable, be able to anticipate what's going to happen because you know how to watch for those trends. So if you start seeing a certain segment of your market or one of your products start declining, don't wait for it to tank. Notice that that's happening. Have honest conversations with your customers about it, with your clients about it, with your peers about it. Have those conversations and decide, is this something that is in its final season? Do I need to be thinking about where this goes next? Or is this something that it just needs a shot of adrenaline? What's going on here? But I would say my strategy in terms of particularly money, Patty, is really just don't stick your head in the sand. Know your numbers, know what they are, and pay attention and be willing to shift, be willing to adjust based on what they're telling you. Have that agility and flexibility to move and let them be a guide for you to where you need to now become the architect of change because of what you're paying attention to.
I love architect of change so much. I can't even tell you, Kathy. I have to say too, that one of the things when I talk to my clients about this very thing, it's really kind of funny, but I never really realized, because I've never done this, I've never really realized, I learned it really early on not to put, I know we keep talking about basket, but not to put all my money in one basket, meaning that it isn't even just about having different revenue. It is knowing where your money is coming from. A lot of times what I see is that when people create stuff, then they're going to say, oh, I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to go do that, and I'm going to do that, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But the money all comes from the same place, and they don't track it or measure it. And so when something goes wrong, it can tank the whole thing because they're not really looking. For me, I just didn't get that because every single thing I do, I already think about how am I going to monetize that? What am I going to do before I even do it? So then I can track it. So I know when do I need to make some shifts? Oh, maybe this isn't doing so well without it tanking everything, right? You can shift and change and do other things. So I really agree with you. That's part of really being ready and watching and measuring. It is amazing to me how many people still do spaghetti marketing, as I like to call it, and they just kind of throw things at the wall and wait to see what sticks. No. You need to be ready and know what to watch for. So it's like changes happen. Sometimes things go good. Sometimes things don't go so good. But knowing when to not do it anymore, not to just wait until, oh, I lost all this money. Well, didn't you see it along the way? It doesn't usually just happen in a moment, right? You can see it coming if you're measuring and watching. You know, it does give you clues, so you can kind of pay attention to that.
Absolutely does. And there's no place we can spend more money and not get the return we want than in marketing, because in today's world, you know, we can spend a lot of money there. So it's so critical that we are paying attention. But Dr. Henry Cloud wrote a book that was probably, it's in my top 10, but it's called Necessary Endings. And it taught me so much about paying attention. And it just paying attention and being willing to end something, to be the pruner. You know, he talks about everything, every growing thing needs to be pruned, and including us, you know, and including our businesses, including our lives, including our relationships. And I think that's so critical to say, if you're going to throw money out there and you're going to use this particular marketing tact or whatever that might be and invest in it, if you're not measuring the results, so you can make a decision whether you're going to keep doing it or not, you can look up a year later and say, hey, I've spent all this money on this. I haven't gotten any return. You could have known that in 90 days and made a better choice.
Exactly. I love that. So Kathy, I have a question for you. Literally for the last 20 minutes, I've been like just really wanting to know the answer to this question. So it's a question that people ask often, I think, but I want to take it to the next level. So if you could have lunch with any CEO, who would it be? But here's the part I really want to know. Not just who it would be. That's the part that gets asked often. But what I want to know is, what is the first and most important question you'd want to ask them? So really, it's not just who, but what would you want to ask them if you were sitting down? Because like, what's the burning thing? They're like, oh, if I could have lunch with this person, this is what I really want to know. I don't get why they did this or whatever. What would that question be?
Oh, goodness. Well, one of the names that pops to mind for me is Maria Shriver.
Ooh.
And I think because I'm fascinated with women that have gone through a lot of really tough disruptions and things and yet just seem to float through those things with such grace. And yet, you know, they're not. I mean, you know, they're human like everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she's faced some pretty tough personal situations with the scrutiny of the press and everything else. And yet she somehow just stayed so solid. And so I think she would be a person to have lunch with. I think that I would love to meet her. And I think the first question that I would ask her is, what does she feel, or where does she get her best inspiration? Because what I love about her is that she's always coming up with something new. She's got, whether it's a new, her newsletter, her magazine, her on-air work, her products, the things that she does in the Alzheimer's Foundation. How does she choose? What does she use as her litmus test, as her decision tree, whatever that might be? How does she choose what's next for her? I think that would be the question.
I love it. That's a great one. So, we've been talking a little bit about people and the things we fear and, embracing change. What is the lesson that took you the longest to learn? We all have them.
Yeah. Probably the lesson it took me the longest to learn was that there was nothing more important than my health.
Ooh, good one.
And I kept letting that take the back seat to everything else I needed to do. And it speaks to one of the things we talked about earlier about being ready for what's next and the price and the cost of neglect. And I don't think that shows up anywhere like it does with our health. And when we neglect things like that, we are going to pay for it. And the thing of it is that we can see it coming, right?
I always say pay now or pay later.
Right. And Jim Rohn used to say you get to choose the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. And yeah, so you choose your pain, right? And I'm glad that I have, at least in my 60s, come to embrace it, because even though that to some of your listeners may sound ancient, I'm not. I still have way lots more to do and way more time to go. And I'm fascinated with how different things are today than they have been in other times of my life. But now in my life, my health is first. My health is first, and whatever I need to do every day to get my health back to where I can operate at my optimal, I just won't sacrifice that anymore.
That's awesome. And I'm so thankful for that too, because I love having you in my life. So Kathi, what's next for you? Do you have a project you're working on? What's the next thing? I know we're talking about the book. When's the book coming out, by the way? Let's talk a little bit about that book.
Well, the book has had a couple of pushes forward on the date, but getting near completion with the manuscript, and then it will go to editors. So I really wanted to have it out by the end of this year, but it's looking like it's probably going to be January before it actually hits the streets in terms of is available. But what I'm doing differently this time, Patty, and what's new is when the book comes out, either with the book or shortly thereafter, I'm also going to be launching a course that will go with it.
Oh, great.
I really want this book. The first book was really sharing my story and trying to be an encouragement and inspiration to people to see it differently, to see the change in their lives differently. I really want this book to be one that inspires them to take the reins. And I think that I have a responsibility when I do that is to give them something practical to do that with. And that can be a challenge to do just in a book, right? And so what I want to do is have a course that goes along with this that says, okay, if you really want a practical guide on how you can apply this and make this work for you in whatever area of your life you want to work on, it's going to be a course that will go with it. And the course is the Resilience Blueprint, Finding Your Way Forward, and really teaching you how to do this in really practical terms and giving you some really good solid action steps. And I've not done that before, so I think that's going to be new. And it's important, an important companion, I think, to the book. And then after that, I really want to be building a community of like-minded folks that really want to have this. My name of my newsletter is Possibility Seekers. I really want people that are seeking that. And I do want to pause for a moment and give credit where credit is due. Architects of change is really a term I learned from Maria Shriver. And that's one of the things that she seeks out. So that really is where even that concept came from.
I love it. I really, really love it. And I love that you're doing this thing too, because, a lot of times it, really sounds like in this second book, really honestly, getting ready for change. And so a lot of times somebody could read a book and they're like, oh my gosh, this really is what I need to do. But they don't know exactly how to do it. Like they need something. So a lot of times it's like when we tell our clients, right, you still have to do the work. You just don't have to do it alone, right? And so having this course, I think for people who may totally embrace it, but they're not quite sure what the action steps are, I love it when somebody helps you with that. Like, okay, good, but where do I start? Because otherwise they're like, oh yeah, I want to do it. But then when they get stuck, they just put it down. So having that, I think, is like a great next step for them. So I love that. So Kathi, how can everyone connect with you?
The best way to connect with me about all the things that we've talked about is through my website. And of course, you can get there or find me through really pretty much most of the social media platforms. But the company is McKinsey Circle. And that's the website as well. MACKENZIE, McKinsey Circle, CIRCLE.com. You can also put in possibilitypartner.com and it'll get you there. Or you can put in my name, Kathi Laughman, KATHILAUGHMAN, whatever is easier for you to remember. But there on that page, you can connect with me on all the social media platforms that I'm on. You can sign up for my weekly newsletter. And when you do that, you'll get a download of my top 10 reading list, which I have to tell you, it's a real top 10 reading list. These are 10 books that have changed my life in some way. And I really enjoyed putting that together. So you're able to get that, and that's right there on the homepage of the website. There's a page on the website that's books, and you can not only get to the book that it's already out there to buy, you can register to get on the list to be notified and know about what's happening with the new one coming out. And then there's a tab there for courses where you can sign up to be the first to know when the course is getting ready to launch. So lots of things there for you to connect and ways to connect with me right there on the website.
You're so generous, Kathi. I absolutely love that. So now we've come to the portion of the show that I really love. It's one of my favorites, if it's okay if I say that. But I call it the open mic section, kind of my version of social karaoke. And this is where I hand the mic over to you. And I want to make sure that I serve you in as gracious a way and as generous a way as you have served the audience today. So here's the open mic. Share with us anything that maybe we didn't talk about or you want to elaborate on. Just here's the mic. What would you like to say before we wrap up?
I think one of the things that I would like to say is that we tend to, in these conversations, tend to think about when we talk about, are you ready for what's next? We tend to think about that as that there's something coming at you that may not be what you want. I want to flip that a minute and challenge you that in many cases, what we are surprised by the most is our success. And I want to say, are you ready for what's next? Are you ready for your success? And you need to be ready for it. I've seen so many people that went through growing pains with their company. And the reason they went through growing pains with their company is because they didn't plan to be successful. And so one of the things that I would challenge you on is being ready for what's next is in part being ready to be successful. And imagining that, seeing what that looks like and saying, what would I do differently and how would I do this differently knowing I'm going to be successful?
I love that. Thank you so much, Kathi, for being here with us today. Everyone, make sure you go to her website and connect with her on social media, buy her book, get on that waiting list. We'll have all of that in the show notes for you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and review the podcast on your favorite listening platform. Remember, sharing is caring. And we will connect again on the next episode of Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you for joining us today on the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast. To shorten your learning curve even more, make sure to grab your free copy of the Marketing, Media, and Money magazine at www.marketingmediamoney.com. I promise your business will thank you.